are you telling us to be late?
Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. Marley, you want to take roll call?
Sure. John Dart,
Yes, here.
Kurt Woniger,
Here.
Patrick Tam.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes of the February 12th, 2024?
So moved. Make a motion.
Just a comment, just a couple of typing errors, my name for a couple of, like 2 or 3 different times in there.
Sorry, but I tried to catch those from Kim, so
Yeah.
I apologize.
Some of them are spelled correctly, some of them are not, just from a consistency
Yes.
standpoint.
Yes, we'll try to make sure that
And
happens.
there's a person's name, it said John, but I thought it was John Rogers, but I don't know if was somebody else mentioned in that meeting? And it wasn't spelled Rogers.
That is right, I caught that too.
Yeah, and I thought, okay, that's somebody that, I think Danielle, maybe you mentioned the name in the notes, but
It says John stated the budgeting process would start in a couple of weeks.
Ben Roger.
Ben Roger?
oh, maybe I missed, yeah, maybe that was,
That was probably John Rogers.
Oh, no,
I sent-
Ben's writing the fiscal report.
that's correct? Okay, maybe that was it then,
Ben Roger's is right up there.
yeah. So again, just the spelling of the names and keeping it correct.
Yeah, I thought I did correct all those. but
There's
maybe
one in
they-
the next paragraph down, right at the
Okay.
beginning, there's one at the,
Well, I think so she does them, sends them to me, I review them, I think I corrected them, but perhaps mine look right. So maybe I neglected to send those to her, I will try and be more on that, I apologize.
no problem.
So is Ben's last name spelled correctly?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Seems right over.
Would you like to make a motion with the
I'd like to make
recommended
a motion
changes?
to approve with those changes.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, make a motion to approve
Motion to
or a
approve.
vote, or take a vote.
Somebody second that?
I'll second. We have no real choices.
Marley, you want to call a vote?
Kurt Woniger,
Yes.
Patrick Tam,
Yes.
John Dart,
Yes.
motion.
Okay, we'll move to the first item on the agenda, the clerk treasurer's review of the monthly reports, the appropriation summary.
Well, I'll tell you, since they're all attached there, rather than really review them, I included them for your review.
Okay.
My PowerPoint presentation will really explain, as I think really was asked of me, tell us what they are. So, that might be the better way to go, rather than reviewing them at this juncture, if that's okay with you guys. Or if you have questions about a specific report, maybe I can answer a specific question.
Well, as long as, I feel comfortable as long as we bounce back and forth. So
We can
if we're,
do
if
that.
we're looking, if you're explaining the appropriation summary via the presentation, then let's just go back and look at it to connect the dots, if you will, because there's a couple of questions that I have, but,
Okay?
yeah.
Okay. And the other question
I'm fine with that.
is this the one linked or?
This is the
or
one
it
that's linked.
Okay, perfect. Great.
Is that okay?
Yes, it's the right one, because I switched it at the last minute. So. All right, well, here is your presentation. If you want to go to the next slide, Chris, so we'll just start there. So, I'm sorry there for the little botch there. I did fix that on mine too, but that was, again, at the last second about what are GAAP financial statements. So GAAP stands for Generally Accepted Accounting Principles. And they're basically the rules, accounting rules and conventions that are used to prepare financial statements. And first you have to understand that GAAP used by governments does not specifically address every accounting situation, and it has to be interpreted using guidance provided by other similar transactions, and interpretation is often required. There are a number of instances where there may be more than one acceptable way to account for a specific type of transaction, and this is addressed by the rule maker. So the rule maker is the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, or GASB. In the clerk treasurer's office, we assure that the reporting, bookkeeping, and the establishment of the funds are consistent, which is also like what FASB would do for commercial companies, including private, private sale businesses, and also not-for-profits. So the SEC delegated their responsibility to FASB after like the 2002 Enron scandal. And so that had to do with the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. And then the National Council on Government Accounting, they created a lot of the principles prior to GASB, which is sponsored by the Government Finance Officers Association, or the GFOA. GFOA publishes the book called Governmental Accounting, Auditing, and Financial Reporting, which is used by GFOA to establish the rules for its Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. So I know it's a lot of acronyms, and we're gonna keep going, because you know that's how the government likes to do it, with lots and lots of acronyms. But if you have a newly elected official training book, most of these acronyms are in the back of it, if you need like further definition, but I did not take these from there. Actually like consulted several different accounting books and state agencies just to kind of get you the rundown, to try and explain the timeline and advancement of what we're doing right now. So,
Danielle, GASB really kind of went into effect in government financing in like 2014 or something like that is when, so John, prior to 2014, they went under different principles, but GASB was kind of brought into state government in Indiana for local municipalities to use starting in 2014.
so to get the certificate, the one that we're really going for here in the city, it is a voluntary program for government that prepares an annual comprehensive financial report, also known as ACFR. The Certificate of Achievement reports evidence in the spirit of transparency and full disclosure, and recognizes individual governments that succeed in achieving that goal. A similar program is also available for budgeting, which I don't know if we are embarking upon or not, but it's called the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award, also awarded by GFOA. So what we do here is cash basis accounting. And the cash basis of accounting records records revenues and transfers in when cash is received, and expenditures or expenses out, and transfers out when cash is dispersed. Indiana state law requires that the state examiner, which is the SBOA, receive annual financial reports, the AFR, from the cities via gateway. And we have to do that within 60 days after the end of the year closes. The ACFR, includes not only the unit's essential financial statements, but also includes management and discussion analysis, or MD&A, auditors' reports, supplementary information that helps provide stakeholders, such as investors, lenders, and regulators, with accurate insights into the organization's finances. So did you follow that trail of all those great acronyms? Okay. All right, so the reports. We do 3 reports every month out of the clerk treasurer's office: the appropriation summary, revenue summary, and the fund report. Appropriation is the act of setting aside money for a specific purpose. We appropriate funds in order to delegate cash for necessities of our operations. In the case of government, revenue is the money received from taxation, fees, fines, intergovernmental grants or transfers, security sales, as well as any sales made. Finally, fund reporting focuses primarily on the sources, uses, and balances of the current financial resources that often have a budgetary orientation. We'll get into governmental fund categories shortly. So now we're where we're at, just talking about appropriation. So I don't know if this is a place where you want to flip back and forth or not, but.
Well,
this
yeah, let's
splits
go
it.
through
Okay,
the appropriation slides and then maybe go back to the
I asked
report.
Chris to kind of put them side by side if you wanted
Yeah,
to
we can do
look
that.
at them that way. Easier said than done, right?
It's not easy to see no matter the screen.
Hey,
Screen's not big enough.
you can make it smaller.
We used to have a
so
whole wall of
why
screen.
don't you try maybe just the top, so you have the headings, I think, more than anything.
Like that?
Oh,
That's
good
good.
grief,
That's good.
let me pull those
That's
up, I can't
perfect.
see that far away.
Oh, no,
And I don't
I
have it
can't see it
memorized
here,
in
but I
order.
can see it there.
We all have our eyesight issues, they're all coming to fruition.
Yeah. It's more of the categories you're gonna talk about.
Right, right.
Could you do, instead of
Let me just tell
Do
you.
vertical, do them horizontals?
Sure, we can try that. Whoop. Go away.
Well, I can sort of do it from here. I mean, the bullets aren't as important because I can sort of talk about those. Right, so at the top where you see budget and actual and then it's divided, when we do budget and we talk about forwarded encumbrances, I have a whole slide or two dedicated to what encumbrances are. But by and large, we really don't have many, though we do have some. And I'll explain why we have some, but I can tell you that at the end of the year, last year, council was presented with a batch of encumbrances which they declined to pass. That doesn't mean that we have none, because a project really has to be underway in order for those encumbrances to carry forward. So current is what was actually budgeted in the 2023, working on 2024 budget cycle. And then you'll see where we have additional appropriation items. Either that's going to be what we added to current or what we took away from current when we did all your transfers. So when you get into actual, then you're looking at the expenditures month to date and year to date. And those are just cumulative totals.
But we go back, the current budget is, that 143,000 is, the 112 has been taken out of that already, or is that?
That is going to be 112 that was added to it.
So the administrative salary. I guess what, in a perfect world, I would say, it would say, here's your budget, which is current. Here's what was established. You had taken money in, you put money in or taken money or transferred it out. Here's your new balance that that line item is responsible for.
Right,
Where does that show up on there? That's not shown up as the new budget number then, is it?
the current budget is the new budget number with any additional appropriation
Okay, so
adjustments or transfers.
it has been, okay.
Yeah, that's
revised.
like,
So is the administrative salary, is it 155,767, or is it 143 minus the 112?
it is 143,705.
So prior to that, it was 30-some thousand dollars. Cause you added 112 to it. That's what you just said.
You're right,
But how could an administrative salary be $30,000 for the year?
well, one, it only accounted for, at the time, yeah, it wasn't right. No, it wouldn't have accounted for 1 month.
That can't be right, because what you're saying is that the admin, health and dental, the next line, if you added 27,000 to it, it would have been in the hole
Okay,
in the beginning of the year.
okay, so I think what it is then, because we just finished those additional appropriations, we will be adding, and we haven't run probably a final budget report yet, because Jeremy and John had been the only two additionally budgeted for. in the 2023 budget. So we did have to add significant funds, so we would be adding the 112 to the 143.
But go down the line where it says admin, travel, training, seminars. You had a $3,000 initial. You took 50,000 out, or you added 50,000 to the budget?
We transferred 50,000 out to a different department, I believe. The difficulty in this report is from what we started with to where we are today, we've had an additional appropriation and a batch of transfers, but haven't been able to yet run a total budget report. So I apologize in advance for being a little unclear on what I'm looking at as far as this appropriation summary goes. Ben might be able to better explain it because he had been working on it. But what you're going to end up with in current will be the total amount budgeted in that line. It just may not appear that way right now.
Yeah, I mean, from even just what I can remember,
Let me pull this up. I'm gonna go to
the transfer.
go to NAV and then I can tell you because that is complete
'Cause it-
there.
I agree with you, John. It looks like it's a negative being taken out of the fund.
Yeah.
So the difficulty in understanding it is because we do double entry accounting. When you expect a debit to appear as a minus and a credit to appear as a plus, they're reversed because for every credit, there's going to be a debit, and for every debit, there's also a credit.
Well, just from a layman's standpoint, when a department head is looking at this, the most important thing is to say, I started with $100,000. I'm through February, I spent 20,000. I've got $80,000 left to spend in my department
Yeah.
or in these line items for the balance of the year. Is that clear in this?
It is not clear in this report, only because the accounting had not been finalized at the time of this report. So what we're looking at now is admin salary budget is 462,000. I've got this right, let me double check, yep, $462,759.
Where's that shown?
She's in NAV, so right now, if you're, the way that our budget is put into NAV, it's put in quarterly. So you're only seeing the first quarter of the budget.
That's right. Okay, so some of our appropriation summaries, and I'll have Misha fix this. By and large, last year, I had her doing where the current budget was the total instead of the quarter.
Yeah.
Because it is that confusing, and so they have not all come out the same. But we have had some problems with our jet reporting where those are changing, so I'll ask her to go back. We can rerun the report so that thank you, Chris, for a lot for determining that. So when we look at it, we wanna see the current total,
Total.
yes,
Not-
rather than the quarter.
We're looking at a quarter report and we're only 2 months into it.
Right,
Correct.
right. And it shouldn't come out this way anyway, but I had not caught.
So are you telling me that in the future, we will see, here's the full budget for the year?
Yes,
I mean, in a perfect world, what I'd like to see is, here's the budget for the year. Here's what was spent in January, February, March, total year to date, and total balance.
so,
I mean, that's how somebody can manage a true budget. You can't
so
manage
what
it
it
other way.
usually will show you, like I said, and I think she may have pulled the wrong report to do this, but what it usually would show is the year-to-date current budget, and then it shows you the expenses for the month, but we have to run the report every month. So we don't need to make the report bigger in order to make it better, but we do have to correct what's in the current column,
Okay.
for sure.
Okay.
So then it would show you, with the additional appropriation, the $462,759. So you can see then what's been expended month to date for salaries. And this is what would be left on expenses year to date. But again, it's not gonna be right because we have to have the right starting number.
Yeah, the unexpensed balance.
Mhm. So if you want the total, John, actual expenses out of admin salary to date is $162,721.30.
It's been almost a whole month since this report was run, so.
So 162's come out of it already?
Mhm.
Does that include, is that just the salary line item?
Mm-hmm.
So 462,759 will not be enough for that line item for the year.
I think that 462 probably included a lot of transfers when we were going to make Caitlin's department a separate department. So she had a separate salary and it's all going to be adjusted as soon as we can do, like I said, we could do a budget report now, but we have done the first round, the additional appropriation, and then that second batch that appeared as an additional appropriation as far as the transfers, and those were just transfers. So,
So by the end of the month, you think it would be all, or?
yeah, I think by the end of this month, your next month report, especially after
Right.
correcting that current column, will look largely different.
So if you, at the end of this quarter, if you ran a quarter report and then you ran that monthly report, we should be able to compare numbers.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I think that's what we need to see.
Just the beginning of this year has been
Mhm.
difficult for everyone. We're still even catching some adjustments, issues
Mhm.
as of today, so.
Okay,
That's probably gonna happen for a couple more months.
That's my guess, right?
Mine too, right?
Yeah.
And thank goodness you're catching them.
Right.
Or Chris's guys, or whoever.
Right, we're
so,
having,
so who are the main users of this report?
every department head
Okay.
gets to see their department. And a few get to see everything.
So could you show us one of them that maybe didn't have any appropriation changes or add additions to it that, I think there was a couple of them in there, that wouldn't have anything that you could
wanna-
walk through it? Go ahead and scroll down.
I'm trying to think of the ones that the department, I
Keep
mean,
going
even
down.
my department had
Keep going
the
down.
additional
Yeah,
appropriation.
everybody had,
Everybody had one.
yeah, I mean, the services, they all had additional
Main
appropriations.
challenge with this report again is you're only gonna see your quarterly budget here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's scrutinize the IT department for a minute.
Sounds great.
You just gave him more money.
Pretty good at that,
Hang on,
so.
John.
No, but, let's just say, I mean, take that right in the middle, it says IT consulting is at 66,250.
Yeah.
Right, so there was no additional dollars put in or taken out of that
Correct, but
line
that's,
item,
That's only a quarter,
that's only one
but that's in
quarter.
one quarter.
Yep.
one
Are
quarter.
you gonna, I'm sorry, did we say you're gonna keep it that way, or you gonna,
No.
okay?
No,
We're going to correct it.
we're gonna
Okay.
use it.
Quarters,
It's just, I think it's just difficult to,
the software automatically breaks it down into quarters. And for some reason, we've had a lot of trouble getting our reports to print. It seems to be some kind of downloading, I don't know, issue. I know they've mentioned it before. Something about the size of the files are so big. I don't know, Finley and Cook continues working on it, but it is just a jet reporting thing where we can change it from a quarter to the total, which obviously is gonna help.
okay, so, but the way it reads right now, $38,000 of the 66 has been spent in this through February. You got a 57%
This is unexpensed.
unexpended,
Yeah,
Oh, okay, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
at the top.
yeah.
which
This is
represents
what-
57% of the
So this is what
budget
I've used to date in my consulting line, year to date,
for the quarter.
for the
Yeah, it
quarter.
didn't scroll down.
It's
the
just
header.
actual year to date, right?
Actual year to date.
Yeah.
As of the
That makes-
February 29th.
And
That makes sense, John.
57% of your budget is left for the quarter,
Yes.
based on the way this is done right now.
Correct, yep.
Gotcha, okay.
Which is, to your point, throws you completely out of sync.
Yeah, it's just not, in my opinion, a way
It's
that
not.
people think about managing budgets, but.
It's hard.
I
Yeah.
agree,
And
don't like-
especially
don't like the software
most of the year stuff, you know, is happening the first quarter, you know, most of your upfront cost.
It's like,
True.
it's like the salt budget every year, you expend 75% of it in the
Yeah.
first 2 months of the year. And then you don't spend anything for the next 9, 10 months, and you spend the
Yeah.
last 25% in December.
We see
Understood.
that a lot, like with subscription services,
Yeah.
because we all pay for our various,
Yep, in the beginning.
First of the year.
yeah.
First quarter, yeah.
And that might be like this line here, is you don't expect to probably go over in that line. It's just you had an expenditure that hit in the first quarter, may not even have anything in the second and third quarter.
Alright, so improvements will be made on this and be,
Yes, and again, I apologize because they typically are not a quarter.
So what ends up happening, John, is that last column, if you get towards the end of the year and you're way over or you're needing more money in that, but you're not using money in another line, you ask for an appropriation, move money into that line. make
Within
the
lines.
difference.
It's not an appropriation, it's just a transfer.
That's a transfer, but if you would take, if you had to take it from another area,
Right.
that'd be appropriation,
Right.
yeah.
Yep.
Correct.
Right.
yep, that makes sense.
Okay, well, sorry about that report. But just to kind of, I'm sure you guys know what the active appropriation is, and you are going to decide on the short-term and long-term needs that are determined by the administration. The appropriations report tells us how money is being allocated and whether it's being used effectively, but not so much on a quarterly report.
It's not being effective at all right now.
So what you see are the operating activities, the expenditures only, and the actual expenses there in the last column, and then also unexpended balances. So encumbrances, and I kind of went on about encumbrance because I think there's some confusion sometimes about what it is or how you can use it. So even just for my own knowledge, because again, we have some encumbrances, but they have been considered to become what we would call stale, where maybe we encumbered some funds for an ongoing project and we're trying to determine, hey, has that project been completed or not? Well, basically, the SBOA guidance on it is, if you haven't used it in 12 months, it's stale. There's probably not an ongoing project that it could be considered ongoing if you haven't touched it in 12 months. So we would want to kind of put an end to those encumbrances. But an encumbrance indicates that a portion of the fund balance has already been committed and is not available to spend on something else. Normally you would have a purchase order for it or some kind of contract already in place. So the standard of guidance on encumbrances includes a lawful contract that has been entered into with a vendor or contractor on or before December 31st of that year. So that's why you see our encumbrances performed or asked for before the end of the year. This is where an appropriation exists for the entire amount of the contract and all or part of it has not been paid by that same December 31st date. Typically, an encumbrance shall be considered stale if there's been little to no activity within the prior 12 months. Outstanding encumbrances should be periodically reviewed to determine whether still in effect. If not, the outstanding encumbrance balance should be liquidated, thus freeing the related funds for future expenditures.
So, Marla, you said that it becomes stale after 12 months. How do you handle, would you classify public works projects differently for that? Sometimes public works projects have all sorts of delays.
They can have delays, but usually if there's just something that is hit on it, we know it's still going on, or we make a phone call or send an email
Right.
and ask John Nail, hey, do you still need this or is this done?
But it's still available, right?
We have not done anything with stale encumbrances yet, but there are some that we have carried now for several years. The answer can't be, yeah, it's still ongoing if it hasn't even been started necessarily, unless there's a definable reason for why something isn't
Well,
occurring.
we could have a problem getting property. right? So it's a roundabout and we can't get
Yeah.
the property and we're
Right.
going back and forth with the court system,
Sure.
which is gonna be slow as slow can be, right? The
Right.
courts are gonna be
Right.
slow, so.
And we, like I said, we have never, to my knowledge and
Okay.
talking with Cindy, never considered anything totally stale, but I think there might be two where the encumbrance money left is fairly small, and I think the projects might even be completed, but you know, you're always waiting for that legal bill that's outstanding or whatever. It reminds me of, you know, being in,
If you don't encumber it, then it affects your next year's budget, because you gotta take it out.
Sure.
So
Absolutely.
that was always the way I kinda looked at it, as extending that budget, or not impacting the following year's budget, because something was already planned in the previous year, but you just haven't had a chance to write the check for it.
Yeah, you just push
For
it.
the services.
yeah, it's a way to keep that money from reverting back to the general fund or the fund it came from. Yeah.
Okay.
So there are 4 reasons for encumbrance. Generally, there are some more, but lawful contracts, purchase orders, bond issue proceeds, and that's where John was saying, oh, we might have them for a project, yes, through a bond, that takes a very long time. And state or federal grants, those can take a while too, just to be awarded. And so if it's an 80-20 match, but we know we're gonna have to pay 20, we can leave that sit out there until the grant has been determined or not, so. That's kind of why I put a little bit of information on there about encumbrance. Revenue summary, and I don't wanna like belabor this, cause I think you guys know, so hopefully this is a high enough level overview for you of where all we get funds from. Obviously, the revenue summary is going to show you that, but I wanted you to have a better idea of how often sometimes things are paid, so on and so forth. So, most revenues are received by the city, are distributed by the state or county, and are based on statutory formula and controls. There are very few taxes a municipality can pass on its own. Property is assessed by the county assessor to determine AV. The tax base is valued using both real and personal property. Real property, such as a building and the land it sits on, is based on market value as determined by the assessor. Personal property consists of business equipment assessed by the taxpayer. Property is assessed beginning January 1st for taxes payable in the following year. Tax rates are based upon net assessed value and show us the total taxable value after deductions or tax abatements or real and personal property within our unit boundaries. Deductions and exemptions include tax exempt and non-taxable property or homestead tax credit and other miscellaneous deductions. MVH is funded by registration fees, licenses, gasoline taxes, titles fees, and weight taxes. They can be used for construction, reconstruction, preservation, repair, maintenance, oiling, snow removal, weed and tree cutting, and cleaning of highways, separation of the grades of crossings of public highways, the purchase or lease of highway construction, equipment, maintenance equipment, and the painting of surfaces and highways for safety and traffic regulation. So a whole lot of stuff, but I wanted you to have the list. These funds can be used to pay bond principal and interest if the bond was sold to finance road projects. At least 50% of the distribution must be used for construction, reconstruction, or preservation of roadways. LRS is distributed based on population and must be used for engineering, land acquisition, construction, resurfacing, maintenance, restoration, or rehabilitation of local and arterial road systems. The purchase, rental, or repair of highway equipment, local costs required to undertake a recreational or reservoir project, or to pay bond principal and interest on road projects. And then the cigarette tax, that is deposited into the general fund and budgeted in the cum cap improvement fund. It can be used for capital development or any other governmental purpose for which money is appropriated by the fiscal body of the city. In Westfield, CCI is generally used for building and capital improvements. And then finally, I did riverboat tax, just because we do get quite a bit from riverboat taxes. And they may be used to pay for any legal or corporate purpose of the unit and are deposited in the general fund. And then we do have other available taxes. ABC gallonage, if you're not familiar with that, is basically the amount of alcohol that is sold within the city, by gallon. So they take all that beer, wine and whatever and add it all together and
That just keeps growing, I'm just saying. I don't wanna point any fingers at anybody who lives in
Yeah, you were
Westfield.
looking at Patrick.
Happy
I-
hour starts July first, that's all I'm saying.
Occupational hazard.
Yeah.
And then I
Frankly,
just,
guys, I live
I
in
noted on the slide for you, like how often they're paid. And Riverboat, I put usually in August, but they do their initial distribution in August, and then if they still have money left over, they'll kick us a little bit more, which they did in September and October last year.
So if you go back to the report, you can't tell when this revenue comes in, whether it's monthly, quarterly, or,
Well, you can under month to date, but you want the actual date.
I'm just curious as to say, okay,
Yeah, 'cause-
BZA fees come in monthly, plan commission fees come in monthly. There's no way to tell from this report, you'd have to look at some of the report to know that?
The more detailed
Um,
report.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's not critical to have that, I just curious on how much of this is coming in monthly, quarterly, whatever. The other thing is there a report or somewhere that shows what the explanation of this, of each of those are? So for example, the general cable franchise fee, what does that actually mean?
Oh, this is pretty good.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm just,
No, it's a great question.
okay, I mean,
No,
and
it's-
there's a
it's
lot of
actually a
line
great
items, there's a
question.
lot of line items on there in that report, 7 pages of line items that I'm going, all right, they're collecting fees from a lot of different things. What are they, and can they, what's the word I'm looking for?
No.
Can it be influenced?
Caitlin, are we in litigation on the cable franchise fee that Fishers is and as well as a couple communities in Lake County?
Not that I have seen, but that I
Yeah.
don't have a lot of the
So it's
files,
actually a great
so.
question, Jen. So I'd love to know what our general cable franchise fee was 5 years ago, 8 years ago. So think of it as, remember the old school cable lines, right?
Yeah.
Running through people's yards and so forth, so those communities got paid. So then there's litigation right now over the air, if you will, internet-based, YouTube TV, Hulu, those types of things. Because they're trying to avoid paying those fees. So, in some communities, some of these figures, I mean, is that 1 month or is that the cumulative?
That's 2 months,
Two
but
months just
like,
received in.
it was all received in one.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, so I mean, you know what, I mean, it's
So-
not a small chunk of change if you
No.
analyze it out.
All right, so I'd like to know, is there a place to find the definition of each of those line items? And then, what's the, how are the fees calculated? Is it
Pardon?
10 cents per thousand or whatever it is, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Honestly, John, I don't know how it's calculated. I can try and find out for you. Chris might even know better, cause it's usually, I think, a fee sort of more connected to him
No.
than me, as far as I know.
Some
John,
of
some of
them are
those-
set, some of them are set specific by contract. Others, like your motor vehicle highway gas tax and stuff, those come in based on,
State
so.
legislation.
Right.
So for example, when COVID hit, nobody's driving, there's no gas tax coming in.
Right.
So it really affected the revenue coming into all the agencies within the state.
and I
But-
think it'd be great to just to know that.
Yeah.
Know what the definition
You
is and how
might,
it's calculated.
Look in your newly elected official training handbook
Yep.
for those calculations or how they're dispersed. I mean, honestly, we don't track it because we're not required to know the formulas or track the amounts. We get what we get.
Yeah.
But not on all of them.
Not on all of them, but I can give you a general idea. If you look at all the fees that we get, I'll say locally, like permitting fees, BZA fees.
That should be an ordinance probably.
Those
That's our
are
fees,
all
that's in our
Anything
fees.
from
Those
a-
are our
right.
fees.
Yes,
Those are
if
fees we set.
the
if you
city's
will.
collecting a fee, it has to be laid out.
But that depends
fee
on how many's
ordinance.
coming in or how many's not coming in,
Yeah.
Yeah.
so.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so it's,
Right.
what you would usually typically do, you look at your building permits from the previous year, you look at your number of inspections, how many houses were built, and then you kind of do a forecast projection on what you think you'll.
And we're doing those projections,
potentially-
we're doing those projections in the fiscal plan.
Right.
That's what we're.
Right.
So, okay, so you just brought up another question. Is there a forecast? Is somebody,
Yeah.
should there be, should there be another line on this, again, or some other report that says, here's what the forecast is for BZA fees in 2024. Year to date, we've taken in 11,000 in 2 months.
That's what the fiscal plan will have in it.
Yeah, but what I think John's asking about is, can we revise this revenue summary so you have a third column, if you will, where you go projected annual?
Yeah,
Is that fair, Jeff?
Yeah, and then when you're not at plan or at the forecast, you ask the question, what's happened? Well,
Right.
200 houses got delayed until the following year and we didn't pick up these fees. Right, it's a good opportunity to discuss where fees are coming from and whether we're hitting
So,
the goals.
that can be done, but that's not a requirement of my office.
Oscar, we can barely hear you. Hang on, Oscar.
Yeah,
We are going to be tracking 3 years back, 3 years forward. We do have the breakdown per formula, per revenue, and we are taking into consideration the growth. So that is something that was likely going to be presented today, but decided to not over, it would be too much to present, but just allow for that report to be more of a management report, right? You don't want to create all this extra work on the clerk treasurer's office when we can track it via the fiscal plan, and we can still report on that, and then make adjustments on the accounting report when we know that those changes are happening. But I think once you have a copy of the fiscal plan, you'll be able to get a lot of the answers that you're asking. Okay, but I understand what you're asking, and those are all fair questions. And I think once you have that report, you'll be a lot happier with the product.
Yeah, I just think that this report, as it's drawn up today, is not a really usable report. You look at it and you go, so what? It shows.
Yeah, and that's every city. It's every city, and that's why people like Ben have a job. So Mike Reuter does that report. Reedy does that report. Coonrad does that report. There's a lot of
Per year.
advisors that have that plan for this very reason and why they're in business. So I couldn't agree with you more. I had to have that side project when I was in your shoes. So I feel your pain.
Just bounces all over the place.
Yeah.
Economy.
And Danielle, you might be able to share it with council ahead of time before next meeting, so they have a quick peek at it. I know we still haven't
yeah,
reviewed it, or approved it, but at least a peek knowing that it's a draft.
yeah. I think Ben was adding a few more things to it with John Rogers' assistance on the CIP stuff.
Yeah, and John and I talked about, so for example, John, we are projecting that we will be, because of the growth, that we will likely be eligible for levy appeals, which will get us a higher distribution of the property taxes, but that also comes with additional local income taxes. So we wanna start tracking the world from where we're likely heading because of all the growth. We're gonna have higher AV, which will lead to appeals, which will lead to all these additional revenues, and earmarking those. So Ben's working some changes on some items that John and I talked about, but you can see roughly where we are right now, knowing that there's going to be more changes.
Thank you.
So you good on revenue then? Knowing what's coming?
Yeah.
Okay,
I-
all right, super. Okay, so the fund report. We have 5 main types of local government funds. General fund, special revenue fund, local or home ruled funds, debt service funds, and proprietary or enterprise funds. The general fund is used to account for all financial resources except those required to be accounted for in another fund. It is the general operating fund of the city. The disbursements from the general fund pay for salaries and wages, benefits, insurance, supplies, services and charges, capital outlays, and other financing. Special revenue funds are those used to account for the proceeds of special revenue sources that are legally restricted to expenditures for specific purposes. Those most common types are MVH, LRS, Riverboat, Park and Rec operating funds, and the Rainy Day Fund. Notably, in any fiscal year, A city may transfer not more than 10% of the city's annual budget to the rainy day fund. Transfers can be made at any time during the year, and Westfield has just about $3.1 million in its rainy day fund. Rainy day funds, also known as budget stabilization funds, allow us to set aside surplus revenue for use during unexpected deficits. We'll take a deeper dive on home rule funds in the next slide. So debt service funds, what we call sinking funds, are used to account for the payment of long-term debt, principal, and interest. Then enterprise funds, those are used to account for the operations that are financed and operated in a manner similar to a private business enterprise, where the intent of the governing body is that A, the cost of providing goods or services to the public on a continuing basis be financed or recovered primarily through user charges, or B, has determined it's appropriate for funds to be appropriated for capital maintenance, public policy, management control, accountability, or other purposes. Oh, sorry, Chris. Utility funds are kept in the same manner as other funds in the city's ledger by the clerk treasurer. However, the accounting records are reported to the clerk treasurer's office by guest services. Storm is truly our last utility that we have, that we deal with. But Storm is in a 900 series number, and I didn't really include those just because there's so few of them.
And that's where trash was too.
Yeah, that's where trash was, that's right, so that's been separated out of.
You said the rainy day fund was at 3.1?
Mm-hmm.
It was higher than that in previous years, right?
I have not looked at the rainy day fund historically, but I
we-
don't think so.
We've had it as high as 5,
Okay,
but
that's
it's
what I was
the,
thinking,
yeah,
5 or 6.
but right now it's authorized at that level.
Yeah, explain the importance of keeping a rainy day fund of a higher.
Well, there's a,
I'm gonna jump in here.
yeah, go ahead, Oscar.
Oscar.
Yeah, so, couple of things. DLGF allows you to do your levy appeals and allows you to set your levy, and they take into consideration things like rainy day fund and your operating cash balance, which currently the city as a whole has a significant cash balance. One trick, and I hate to say trick, I mean one strategy for municipalities in order to avoid being capped by the DLGF or having too much cash at hand, because they don't just look at the rainy day fund, but they always look at the rainy day fund as a net positive, is to, rather than utilizing the rainy day fund, to move it to a capital fund, because they can never cut your levy as long as the funds are sitting in your capital fund. Now, that requires some trust between the council and the administration that they won't go and build full statues themselves, but, you know, the way to look at the amount of cash that you have, you should look at it as an operating cash balance as opposed to what is segregated in the rainy day fund, because that's really what you want to base your, you know, operating dollars. Should something tragic happen, that is really the holistic way to look at it. But the rainy day fund is just a restricted fund that you get to kind of say nobody can touch this if this, and you know, some funds can be capped there, but I would look at what your operating cash balance is on something like the rainy day fund, and it shows a negative $16 million number there, and I'm not tracking how that is being tracked, but if you look at the beginning rainy day or beginning general fund balance versus your ending cash balance, that is a better metric to look at it. Sorry, I just wanted to kind of not. A lot of people assume that the rainy day fund is the only funds that are available in case of an emergency, and you know, and it really is your entire cash balance. That's all I have.
And Oscar, as we go through the budget season this year, you and Ben and I, we're gonna go into much greater detail on this because it's everybody's first go-around.
Yes, one thing that the fiscal body gets to decide is what that balance should be a minimum. We do have a plan to bring forward a policy for the council where you have a minimum base cash at hand is how we're gonna track it. And whether that is 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, based on a daily expenditure rate, is what will be the benchmark of not drawing down that cash balance below whatever the line that the council wants to hold.
Oscar, can you explain kind of cash flow as it comes in with property tax disbursements twice a year and receiving that and kind of covering that loss of revenue until it comes in?
Yeah, you just did. You get two big chunks, so 60% of your entire budget is property taxes, then you get them in two big chunks. So, yeah, you said it, it's not,
Yeah.
you gotta have the operating cash balance to float those, and then you have some months where you have huge outlays of cash, so whenever, debt service is being paid, you have massive outflow of cash, going out the city as well, so.
Does the city ever have to borrow money to float that until that revenue comes in?
This city, to my knowledge, does not, but Marla might be able to better speak to that, but I don't believe that
The only reason
city of Westfield has a tax warrant, and if you did, then we definitely need to have a plan to get out of that, cycle.
So as an example, John, back when we were in town, we used to have to take a loan from a bank to float that, to get that revenue coming in, and also the water utility loaned the city $1 million every year until that money came in, and they had to pay it back within that year. And so, we've gotten more financially savvy over the really probably since we turned into a city, and have been able to overcome that. I think the only other time they might have had to take a loan out was after they did the sell of the utility, because they had a $3.2 million shortfall.
We are, Oscar or Ben or anybody would do better to state this than me, but I would say generally, from what I've been told, most cities want at least a 3 to 6 month cushion in their finances. Westfield's in an excellent position and has anywhere between 6 and 18 months depending on who you ask, so we shouldn't be taking loans.
I would agree with Marla that, on your operating cash balance, you should not, you're doing well, but you should set a minimum carry so that you don't get into a position where we have to go and borrow money for cash flow purposes, and, if that is, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and obviously it's not gonna be 30 days, but you get where I'm going with that.
Alright,
We just have to set the bar at a minimum, and you guys will be the ones deciding what that looks like, and we'll make some recommendations for you and give you considerations, but that is a fiscal policy that belongs under this committee and ultimately the council.
And Marla, for this presentation, are all of your notes on the PowerPoint slide?
they should be, yes.
So John, if you want to go back and refer to it, the notes are.
Yeah, I didn't see them when I printed this
yeah.
off, but they're.
They weren't there, it was a different version, cause I
Gotcha.
spent time doing the notes, so yes, it's
Yep,
there now,
I saw
sorry.
those.
Some of the slides are even different.
Okay.
Okay, so I just wanted to talk about a home ruled fund quickly, because we're gonna have one probably coming up here in the very near future. The power is granted by the state of Indiana that authorizes the common council of a city to create by ordinance as many funds as they feel necessary to operate their particular city. The ordinance should provide the information listed from the 5 bullets shown on the screen. A good example of a home ruled fund in Westfield is 206, which is park programming and events. Ordinance 0639, so that was clear back in 2006 when we were still a town, established the non-reverting operating fund for the Parks Department, referencing part of Indiana Code 3610-322, which allows parks and recreation facilities and programs to charge a reasonable fee when necessary. They also want you to offer a number of free events to your community. Similarly, a park department may choose to establish a special non-reverting capital fund for the purpose of acquiring land or making specific capital improvements, which was really the overarching thought of why we need to hang on to 206 and didn't want to just send it to Welcome when Welcome transitioned out of parks and public works and into facilities and events. So what I'm trying to tell you is we're going to establish a new non-reverting fund for Westfield Welcome. So when they host those events and they have revenue coming in, they'll be able to keep it then, and it will basically pay for their future events. But that you also may want to give them some seed money for that, or possibly take some money out of former parks programming to put in this new non-reverting account, which will be your option because the Home Rule Section 2 of the code I recently cited, being most important, says the policy of the state is to grant units all the powers that they need for the effective operation of government as to local affairs. So you can do that, you just need to spell it out. So I'm gonna move through the end of this pretty quickly because I also want to have time just to run through a couple slides on the other presentation. But deciphering appropriation numbers, right now, we use a 9-digit number. After we feel fairly confident that we've done the last of the additional appropriations here at the beginning of the year, I want to switch that to a 10-digit number, which frankly should have been done some time ago, but it was left for me, so I am accepting the can that was kicked down the road, and we'll try and do an overnight swap of changing all these 3-digit numbers that have to do with the funds to 4-digit numbers, so.
Wait a
Yes.
minute, did you say overnight?
Yes, Finley and Cook says they can do it overnight, just everybody will have to understand that those numbers are changing, so. There's,
John, you're gonna have to work early
Yeah,
that day,
I just-
coming late the next
it's,
day.
look, we pretty much do it in filing the AFR anyway,
Yeah.
so it's not as big a gulp, but we do wanna make sure that it's going to work seamlessly before we do it, cause nothing works seamlessly, I get that, so. That will be a big conversation before it's done. Anyway, the first 3 numbers in the set always tell you the fund number, which you can refer back to the fund report if you need to know, well, what the heck fund is that? So those are the first 3 digits of any fund, okay? On the second set of 3 is your department code, which I think I've given some of you, like the list I made of our departments, so that you would know, like my office is 008, council's 010, Chris's is
007.
there you go. So, we all know.
Pay for that now?
He did.
He got lucky.
He's so faithful.
It's a separate revenue.
But at any rate, and then the last set, the object codes, there is a very, very long list of object codes, but you'll see them repeating when you look through those appropriation funds where, you know, if it's 101, 001, 111, you're paying a salary. 119 are medical benefits. So it's not, we don't want it to be a mystery, we want it to be transparent to you so you understand what it is. If you really want that list, let me know. I'll send it again if necessary. I did include on the next slide the department codes, that middle 3 set of number, so that you can see it and visually reference it. And then the last set, those object codes, they're divided out, so anything that is in the 100s is gonna be something where it benefits us from a personnel and services and benefits area. The 200s, they're all some kind of supply. The 300s are service and charges, which can include consulting and promotions and travel training and benefits, I think, yeah, 200, 300. And then 400s are your capital assets and outlays. So I think when you think of it like in groups, it becomes easier to kind of digest. I know, depending on how your mind works, like this was eating an elephant for me. How do you know this? How do you understand what each thing is? And once it's kind of laid out, it's a puzzle that fits pretty easily together. So I did on that final slide, oh, they're so tiny too, yeah, these are just some of the more common object codes, but again, the list is pretty voluminous, so I didn't give you the whole list, but here's the whole list, if you want a copy of it. These are all the funds, the departments, and then the objects is the longest list. So if you need that in the future, let us know, I'd be happy to give it to you. So that's that presentation. There is another slideshow that I actually got from our bank. There's really only 2 slides that I absolutely would love to go through with you, given if you guys have the time. Huntington is our bank. We do not have other banks unless we have other banks that for the purposes of bonds. And we have a lot of other banks in that regard. But for our funds, we use Huntington. Ted Sumner lives in Ohio, and I speak with him and communicate with him frequently. He really helps me a lot with treasuries, so as we have a maturity, which we actually have one this week, I have to determine as the fiscal officer, do I wanna reinvest that money? How do I wanna reinvest that money? Do I sink back in another, this one happens to be 3.25 million. Do I want it to go in all in one lump sum and maybe ladder out over 2 years? But Chris, if you'll flip through there, that's who Huntington is, blah, blah, blah. I encourage you to keep going for me. Okay, this one. So we have basically 2 different ways we're investing money. One is through our portal account, which is where a good chunk of the general fund is sitting because it is accessible to me within 24 to 48 hours if we need the money out. It's accruing 5.19 yield right now. On the first day, we make a considerable amount of money through that account. We also have money we put into treasuries, and those again, they're laddered out over 2 years. You know, the interest rate was a lot better, it's going down. The 2-year quote I got today, if I went for invested in a treasury today, was 4.35. So that's down from, I think the highest that we got was 5.25. But we're looking, you know, at making a considerable amount of interest on the city's money this year. And then we even have an account that I call general fund interest, where sometimes I sweep off the interest that we've made and put it in that. That's invested in that portal account, because what I'd like to do is then fill in any holes in our ladder, or maybe break them out so that we have constant maturity rather than quarterly. The rainy day fund, all those funds are invested. When you look at the fund report, there's one where it was just some interest. I don't know how it got stuck into a different fund. So we have 3.1 million in treasuries, but then like $8,000 sitting in that portal account, just earning interest until I guess we decide we'll throw it in there with something else. The TIF funds, I also have those invested. It's a great place to keep them until we, again, know what we need to do with them. I tried to leave enough funds to cover the TIFs that have the most activity in them. Without a budget, it was a little difficult to know, but that's gonna be changing here soon, I'm sure. So if we have to take money out, again, it's available in 24 to 48 hours. So, and then,
John, when did we start doing these investments?
I'm gonna say 2010, 2011, I started working with Cindy then. And then, and in fact, it was actually the same guy.
yeah,
Yeah, it really was, it was the same. And I think we pretty much stayed on that for 5 or 6 years. and then, I wasn't involved anymore. So it was, it's been a while. I mean, it's been purposeful for a long time, yes.
Thanks.
Sure.
So this is, has more to do with, our money market, the portal account, which does have a sweep account, and, we don't currently have any CDs. We're getting better rates than what we feel like we could necessarily on CDs. There's no point. It's not my job to try and chase yields. It's really not. It's not safe to do that for me. So we wanna make sure that your investment is actually sound more than anything, and that we continue earning the best interest we can. I do have a meeting tomorrow with Trust Indiana, which is the state fund. They were getting better yields than what we were. In the fall, they were getting 5.41. So I don't know what they're down to today, but I'll find out tomorrow. And just kind of looking at options, but don't wanna, if it's not broke, don't fix it, and we're doing really good in that regard. But those are, I apologize for kind of the speed. I went through this one, there's a little more information there, but primarily it's more about Huntington Bank. I can tell you also on our deposit accounts, back in, I think it was 2016, our interest we were earning was 0.05% in 2016. Today, and yet last year, we're earning 3%, and that remains the case today. So we do real well there.
John, how was Huntington originally selected? Just selected by the mayor, or was
No,
that-
we actually did an RFP in '09.
Okay.
A banking RFP. As a matter of fact, Carmel is getting ready to do a banking RFP. I just met with their controller, Ann, and she was telling me, cause I'm trying to, I've been talking to some of the folks in town about aggregating RFPs. So, Noblesville might be considering a trash RFP. So, they're considering a banking RFP. Lisa's, she's gonna get back with me. So I'm always looking for those aggregation opportunities, and because it truly benefits all of us, right? Because the county benefits, everybody benefits, not just the county, but all the cities in the county.
So what I think I'm hearing you say is that probably with the new administration, it'd be good to go through this process potentially again?
For banking, that's Marla's call. I mean, it's Marla's call, yeah. Yeah, that's her call.
Yeah, and given honestly where we are right now, with as much as we have to do, it's just not even on my radar because we're doing fine.
Yeah, it's a huge lift to, switch banks.
Do you have any other questions I can answer today? Do you feel like you have a better understanding? I will get that appropriation summary all fixed up for you.
Yeah, I would just ask maybe at the next meeting,
Okay.
if assuming that we get some updates on these reports, that we go through them again and just say, hey, here's the changes that were made.
Yeah.
So that we,
We'll show you the changes and then we can put together, what I heard from the last meeting was you do want that quarterly report, the color-coded one that we had done.
yeah.
So we'll reproduce that.
Good job.
And just have the monthly then correct and the quarterly report for you.
Yeah, and then we are working on the budget timeline right now,
And training.
in training.
So
What you mean by training is
zero-based budget
budgeting,
training.
which we'll all be invited to,
Correct.
That is correct.
all the council members, right?
Correct. Well, and the clerk's office.
yeah.
We want everybody to hear the message. Danielle and I talked several times about that. We want everyone to hear the message,
Yep.
a message, because that'll make the budgeting delivery when we're doing those process, everybody will be on the same page, cause you'll
Company-
understand why we
What
did
type
it.
of a company have you hired for the training?
It's yeah, Kunrad's doing the same folks that are actually doing the projections for us. They'll actually help us, Ben with Kunrad will actually help us put together the budget package in whole.
Oscar, are you gonna be at that presentation? Oscar, you still there?
I'm here. I just had a hard time finding the mute button. But yes, I plan to be there.
Good, cause I hope you can translate for Ben, cause he's always way over my head.
Yeah, hey,
Danielle and I have discussed that, and my goal is to try to simplify it.
yes, we will simplify that. And
I
then,
love talking to him, don't get me wrong, but
Very-
he loses me pretty quick.
yeah,
Is that in April or May, or what's the timing on that? Training?
Working that out right now. We will have that out by the end of this week. We'll have it out
We're
by the
trying
end of
to-
this week.
And
Ben's
just
working on it
If
right
it's
now.
gonna be more than a pure training and we're gonna go into like the city specifics and a majority's gonna be there, then I would say we notice it as a public meeting too. If it's a true training, then it's not a meeting, but if it goes beyond that and a quorum's gonna be there, we'll have to notice it.
so, and then, once we finalize the fiscal plan, I'll get that out to you guys, so that way you guys can kind of start digesting it for meeting, and then, I'll be sending Marla, I think the only other thing is the finance committee is also supposed to be the oversight committee. And I don't believe, Marla, correct me if I'm wrong, if there was an ordinance created for the oversight committee prior, I don't think there was, I've looked.
I don't think there is. I'll
Okay.
double check in our
Okay.
list, but I don't
I
think
think-
there was.
There wasn't one for the finance committee either, right? I
Yeah.
mean, I couldn't find anything on either one of those terms.
Okay, I'll
So-
double check that.
So we might have to create that, you guys,
Right.
at your guys' city council
I
meeting.
will tell you, the
But I
oversight
want-
committee only met twice in 4 years.
Right,
That part I do remember.
yeah, so we're kind of getting the objectives and committee structure outlined, that's why I haven't come to you yet, cause I was
Okay.
researching.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I was like, it has to be here, it has to be here, and then I was like,
Cause the oversight committee is important for the bond ratings too, right?
correct. Well, and then we'll have a separate audit committee.
Yeah.
As well, so. Just to give you guys a little.
Does that need an ordinance too, or is that?
Probably.
Audit committee, absolutely, it did. It might have been a resolution,
Might have
but when
been a
they put it together, they actually rescinded it.
I mean, I'll have to look into it. I kind of think it goes place by place how you want to create committees. Unless there's a statute about some certain committee, I think it's up to the council to create. I mean, some people have like public safety committees. I mean, finance, of course, is really
Well,
popular, and code committees. I mean, there's,
I do think they talk about it in the COSO, in the COSO outline that is with the State Board of Accounts for the controls.
Okay.
In that controls project, I'm almost sure that the COSO outline that's included in there actually specifically, not about any other, but it specifically mentions the audit
Audit.
committee in there.
Well, so what I mean, I remember a lot of discussions about forming this finance committee, and then they kind of met on a regular basis for a while. Oversight never did, but audit, they did put that together again by resolution or ordinance, because
And then they
they
pulled,
went, well, they had to go through the act of rescinding something they
Yeah.
put together.
yeah.
So, I think you're right.
Yeah, and I
That's why we
can't remember why they pulled it, but I think it had something to do with, at the time, we were, part of that was, in their discussion, was we were going to outsource the audit, right? We weren't gonna have the State Board of Accounts do the audit anymore, we were gonna outsource the audit, and that was part of that whole package.
So they had selected from an approved list of state board accredited auditors, which Oscar had an opinion on that I don't know enough to know about it, but he was glad they didn't go through with this. They had selected Crow Chiswick at the time to conduct the audit. At any rate, so when they I think they decided it wasn't going to save any money.
Marla, you want me
I think I
to help on with it?
Go right ahead.
This is a statutory thing
That is your computer.
from back
So,
too.
yeah, so the State Board of Accounts usually does all audits. They have very specialized people within the State Board of Accounts that do gap-based audits. We are now going to gap, and they're gonna determine who is going to do that audit for 2023. However, for 2024, that will take place in 2025, we have the ability to create a committee, RFP to at least 3 firms, part of the committee has to have a CPA, that's a member of the public. And then we get to pick the auditor that will do the audit next year for the current year we're on. And we have to do that by the end of June if we would like to pick our own auditor.
And you're talking about opting, right? We're opting out of SBOA audit?
Not exactly. We are asking them to audit us in 2020, for 2023 year. We're asking them to do it on a GAAP basis. So it's not an exemption, it's just saying we want you to do a GAAP-based audit.
Oh, but we did that.
Yeah, we have done that.
Yes, we are.
Committee, from what I'm finding, is you asked to opt out.
You're
What I'm saying is that we can choose our own auditor for next year. And if that is something that we wanna do, and I think the mayor is favorable to that, there are pros and cons. Pros being that you get to kind of pick and choose who you wanna work with based on qualifications and everything. When the State Board of Accounts does hire somebody, they do it at a reduced rate. And a lot of times, whether you get Pro or you get BKE, KSM are the main three that the state uses. They use a lower level individual, as opposed to if you're directly hiring them, you can fire them, you tend to get a little bit higher quality. But that does come at a little bit higher cost. So we need to determine whether that is something that is important to the city to have a high quality audit. Not to say that if the State Board of Accounts chooses this year, they haven't chosen who is going to do the audit as of last Thursday. But let's say they choose to hire Crow or BKD and we're not happy with them, we have until June to decide whether we wanna pick our own or not.
Thank you.
Okay, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Sherry, close your notebook, she's
my phone.
Thanks, Oscar.
Yeah.
Doesn't everyone know